Hello and welcome to LionWing Talks, a show where I discuss all things LionWing, tabletop games, Japanese games, and localization. I'm Bradley Hailstorm, founder and president of LionWing. This is a very special episode of LionWing Talks. This is our very special Fledge Witch AMA episode of LionWing Talks. Now, if you have never been around the LionWing community, you don't even know what the hell a LionWing Talks is, well, it's this show. I used to do the show weekly, and then it dropped to like bi-weekly and then monthly, and now I'm like averaging once every 8 months. So I only come back for special appearances, and right now is a special appearance, not because I'm here, but because Fledge Witch is on Kickstarter. And Fledge Witch is a special game, and it is why I'm doing this show tonight. I want to talk about it. I did an interview before the campaign went live with Mildred, the gaming monk, and you can find that on the campaign page where I talked about Fledge Witch a little bit, but I haven't really talked openly about this game ever, in fact. I did a little bit during the thank you video that I posted in our first update last week. But outside of those two instances, I haven't gotten a chance to pull the curtain back on the process, the localization process for Fledge Witch, what it was like developing the game, the issues that we ran into, the issues that we surprisingly didn't run into with this game that we might have run into with previous RPGs, and how much fun it was to be so intricately involved in this project as opposed to some of the previous projects where I wasn't as intricately involved in those projects. So I'm here to talk about all of that. I'm here to answer your questions. I see we've got people in the chat room. If you are watching this on playback, you won't see the chat, obviously. I'm streaming this to Twitch, and then it'll go up to YouTube. And if you're watching it on VOD, that's where you're catching it. So I will try to read off what I'm reading on the screen, but sometimes I just see the chat box and I start reacting to it. And then people who catch this thing later on are like, what is he even talking about? So I apologize that you will not have the privilege to see what I see in this chat. But we've got quite a number of people here, some returning veterans, I see you, and someone who just said they learned about us yesterday. And I'm sure there's some people in between there who came aboard a week ago, 2 months ago, a year ago, and you've only got one other LionWing Talks that I did whenever we had our last campaign up. So welcome all, welcome back. If this isn't your first time, welcome. If it is your first time, I'd like to think that this is a pretty warm environment where we just shoot the shit. That's the whole point of this. I come to these shows with nothing written, nothing planned, because that's when I do my best. You get the best and most honest Bradley when I can't prepare for anything. And that's the way I like it, because I want to be transparent, I want to be authentic, and I just kind of want to shoot from the hip on these things because I think it makes for a more interesting show. And plus, it's not fun to get like prefabbed answers to your questions. Where's the interest in that? I'm not a very good PR person in that regard. I don't think I could ever work PR for any company because they would ask me for my resignation like week 2. Like, dude, you just talk too much. You say too many things that you shouldn't be talking about. That's what I do. Okay, so in the chat, some people may have noticed I've got my handy dandy drink right here. Now, you might be wondering what's in this. And if you've seen this show more than a couple times, you know that there's typically something in this. And the more that I consume whatever's in this, the chattier and the more revealing I get, not revealing of my body, but revealing of clues and discussion points of what we're doing now, what we're doing in the future, and all that good stuff. So that's that. Someone said, yeah, we're almost at 35K. Yeah, so we are almost at 35K. And we are entering week 2 today, about 10 hours ago, almost to the minute. We entered week 2 of the Fledge Witch Kickstarter campaign. Now, if you know anything about Kickstarters, if you've been around the block for a while and you've backed enough projects and you'd follow them closely, you know that week 2 is such a buzzkill. Not because I'm not excited, just simply because you're in week 2 of a campaign. There's not as much buzz about the game as there was in week 1. And so now we enter the long stretch home. So we're on Kickstarter for another 9 days or so. We end next Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's what's going on there. Okay, what do we got? what do we got going on in the chat? I start talking, then I don't read these things, and then that makes for bad audio, because then I got to go back and read it all, and it's not interesting. Okay, so someone said, "Is that an Initial D shirt?" It is, yeah. Someone said that Kingdom Hearts mug is mighty large. It is, but the larger the cup, the larger the liquid. So, okay, let's go through here. If you have questions for me, drop them in the chat there. I will answer them. Someone said, "Is that Arc the Lad on Japanese vinyl?" It is Arc the Lad on Laserdisc. So, got into collecting Laserdisc not too long ago. And I started with Arc the Lad because it's my favorite video game series that no one knows about, unless you're old like me, or some of you in this chat. I know some of you in this chat, and you're as old as me, so you probably know Arc the Lad. Okay, remind me again, is Fledge Witch D6 based? It is. It is D6 based, and it uses its own system. You need, let's see here, I think 6d6 to start the game. I think every player needs to bring 6 of those bad boys to the table with them. Yeah, 6. I'm sorry, 5. I should know these things. But it's been a while since I've really dug into Fledge Witch. So let me talk about that a little bit. I mentioned it during the thank you video on update 1, but if you didn't catch that, let me catch you up to speed real quick. So I was the editor on this game. It's the first RPG that I've been an editor on. Despite the fact that RPGs, that's my genre of choice, and that's ultimately why LionWing pivoted away from board games into the RPG space, because I realized I needed to work on stuff that I was really passionate about, because this is just a side business that I do, and so it takes a lot of time away from my family, and it's got to be something that I'm really excited about and I'm really invested in to take as much time away from my family as these projects do, and so RPGs are our thing. I have been a proofreader on all of our previous RPGs, and I've edited one of our card games, but I had a co-editor. This time, I was flying solo on the editing. Now, fortunately, Jamie, the translator, she returns. This is her second LionWing project. She did the translation for Convictor Drive. That translation is fantastic. It's our best-selling game, by the way, by a lot, by many, many units. I've never had to order a second printing before the first printing was even on the cargo ship. So that was a first for me. That was fun. I'll explain why that happened the way that it did in a little bit. So Fledge Witch, I said I should have known it was 5 per player, not 6 per player, because yeah, I was in this book. I was in this book often, and it was a joy to edit. Jamie is a fantastic translator. She made my job super easy this time around. And I should say that I edited Convictor Drive to some extent as well, but not quite like this. So this was a cool project to work on. This was a fairly fast turnaround for us for RPGs. So we started this project. Let me think here. So I think Symbol House and I. So Symbol House is the design studio that published this game in Japan, and the designer of Fledge Witch is a guy by the name of Haifun-san. I think I signed the contract with them, I don't know, middle of last year or so, and then we got started on it, I guess the end of last year. So this was a fairly quick turnaround for an RPG. It's a little bit smaller from our previous works, both in size. This is an A5 size book, and also in length. But it's packed full of goodness. Every page matters in this book. There's not a lot of wasted space, so to speak. When I talk about the design space, Haifun-san is a very tight, concise designer, and really tries to get the most out of a little. Now, this book is still substantial in size, but he's an interesting designer like that, because he really wants to distill the mechanics down to something that's super accessible, that you're not going to get tripped up on, or that you're not going to have to spend as much time learning the game as you are playing it. And so that's kind of that's Japanese RPGs in general, really. Most Japanese RPGs are designed around being one-shot games. And so they're designed with the idea in mind that people need to be able to sit down, learn the game, play a session, and be done with it. Get in, get out, the whole thing. from start to finish. And so oftentimes Japanese RPGs are smaller in size and scope, and they tend to be a little bit more accessible, and they're more one-shot oriented. Now, the cool part, and this is a question that has come up before about Fledge Witch, so I'll talk about it here as well. The cool part about Fledge Witch is, yes, it's very much so designed around being a standalone game. However, there are 3 scenarios that come in the core rule booklet, that the 3 scenarios can be played independent of one another, right? However, there's a through line with all the scenarios to where you're almost meant to play them as a mini campaign. And that's the way that I would suggest that people play the scenarios. I think you absolutely should not play them as one-offs. I think that play them over the course of however many sessions you need to. That's fine. But I think you start with scenario 1 and you end with scenario 3. And you tell that continuous story, because that's kind of how they've been designed. So that's that. Let me jump back into the chat here. So actually, for the record, this is not bourbon tonight. Actually, this is something else. What could it be? I'll take your guesses. So someone talked about. Can you talk a little bit about the move from B5 to A5 with Fledge Witch and the previous titles? I absolutely can, because it's an interesting story, and we haven't fully discussed this yet. But a joint press release, will be going out this month. Maybe next week. So we got picked up as a client with Diamond book distributors. Diamond, they handle all the distribution for Paizo stuff. They handle a lot of manga. They handle a variety of comics. They're a big deal in the book distribution world. The thing that we have struggled with LionWing, probably because this is just something I do on the side and I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to this, is most of our stuff, we have up until recently been a Kickstarter, almost like a Kickstarter exclusive company. Like, we fund our stuff on Kickstarter. That's where we make most of our sales. And then after the books get put up on our web stores, some independent hobby shops, board game shops will buy our stuff, but we primarily then do all of our sales through our web store. But even that has limited reach, right? This changes the game with becoming a client of Diamond. We'll now be worldwide. We'll be in all English markets, and we'll be in all major bookstores going forward. We will be in the manga and light novel section of your local Barnes & Noble. And that is actually the reason why we transitioned from B5 to A5. So while you will be able to find Pickeresque Roman and Convictor Drive, the first edition in the original B5 size, starting November 7th in your local bookstore, you'll be able to find it in the comic and the light novel section as a big old book. It's going to stand out. And both Diamond and I decided we didn't want that. We wanted the book to stand out, sure, but not that much. And so we needed to size the books down so that it looked like it fit in the light novel and manga section. So when a bookseller was shelving the units on the actual sales floor, they wouldn't see our game and say, oh, this shouldn't be in the manga and the light novel section. This needs to be in the game section. I told Diamond that I did not want to be in the game book section. Whatever they did, do not pitch LionWing as the game guys. I didn't want to do that because honestly, over half of our audience are not traditional gamers. Based on the metrics that I now have of doing this for 5 years, a lot. And now I guess the majority, I can say that, of the folks who buy our stuff do not identify as gamers first. They identify as people who are into video games, manga, anime, light novels, and then somewhere along the way is board games. Now, that's not everyone, right? Because I didn't say that was our whole audience, because there absolutely are people who buy our stuff and they are board game, tabletop game folks first. So those people very much so exist, but I didn't want to be housed next to the D&D books. I wanted to be where I thought we belonged and where I think our market is, the majority of our market. So A5 size is the size of a light novel. It's not the size of a manga. A manga is slightly smaller than a light novel. I didn't want to pare things down that small because although there's not a huge difference between a light novel and a manga, there's enough of a difference that it's going to get pretty hard to read some of our books if we go that small. So that was actually the catalyst for the anthology set. Is I said, you know what? there are people who are going to be jumping on board Fledge Witch who have never backed any of our stuff. And by the way, we have absolutely been growing this year, which is interesting because we haven't had a Kickstarter. We haven't run a Kickstarter since last fall. But we've grown significantly in 2023. I had to look at the calendar to make sure it's 2023. What is wrong with me? And so I said there are probably going to be people who show up to this campaign who don't have our previous stuff, or they picked up one of the books. And what better way to catch them up to speed than by giving them those books in this campaign? And because I'm a sucker for standardization, I like everything to look nice and neat and uniform. I said, you know what? We need to pare these books down anyway. Let's do this. Let's do it now, and let's offer it in this cool anthology book set. And so there we go. We got the anthology set. That is the reason for the jump. What's funny is if you go to a bookstore, you'll find two other TRPGs in the manga light novel section. You'll find the Goblin Slayer TRPG and the Konosuba TRPG. They're both there, and they both are A5 size. And I have made it known that I do not like A5 size with super thick books, just because it gets really hard to keep them on the table and keep them open when you're playing because they're so thick, but the book framing is so small, hard to keep the pages open, hard to see a spread, right? Unless you're putting stuff on the side, and that's ugly. But our books are not as thick as that Goblin Slayer RPG. That is a thick book. So hopefully we won't run into that problem that I've run into with that book when playing that game with my group. The difference also between us and those two others is we will still be hardback. So our A5 size, yep, it's going to be in the manga the light novel section. It's going to be smaller, but it's still going to be a hardback book. So hopefully with that binding, that'll also help a little bit with readability and being able to flip through that thing effectively. So someone in the chat said, what's the Japanese name for Fledge Witch? Brace yourself. Fledge Witch. That's the name. So I'm not big on changing names. So before I started LionWing, I was in video games localization, and it would drive me nuts when a game would completely change its title for its new territory away from its original Japanese title. And I certainly understand the reasoning behind it. I just don't like it. And so when I started LionWing, I said, I'm not doing that. Now, we might add to it. We might modify it slightly. We've added to it. We've never modified anything that I know of. But I like to keep that original branding. I think that's important. I think it's important and respectful of the designers. They have chosen these names very intentionally. And board games are a lot different than video games because so much of the board game market, even in Japan, is geared toward an international market. A lot of the times, Japanese board games titles are designed in a way to where they're easily readable in English, they're recognizable in English, or they can be transliterated in English. And so we've got some weird sounding names, and that's something I really love about our catalog of games because it's very non-traditional stuff. We've got Sonoma Coliseum R, right? What does that mean? We've got Embryo Machine. Oh, let me tell you about the Facebook comments I saw when we were running those ads on Facebook and Instagram. Those were rich. I had to hide a lot of those because they were inappropriate. Gun and Gun, Pickeresque Roman. Now we added a Requiem for Rogues there because I think people misinterpret what the Pickeresque Roman actually means. And also, that is one of those names where it's like, what does that mean exactly? So we threw the subtitle on there. And not for board games, but for RPGs, I love subtitles, which is why we have had and will have a subtitle for every book. Convictor Drive, and now Fledge Witch. So all of those names are the names of the games in Japan. So that's that. Someone said Fledge Witch is very much a great con game. Yeah, I think it can be because you can set up and break down if you want in 2 hours. Let's see here. Can you play TTRPGs and cons? You can. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of games are run at cons with TTRPGs, believe it or not. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm catching up with all of this. So if you're watching on playback, I'm sorry. I'm just reading through all of this. Someone says, ooh, Mr. Drink. Some smooth Japanese whiskey, perhaps? Maybe. Okay. Let's see here. What are you guys seeing? Oh, someone's seeing lag. Okay. Has LionWing's focus from board games to TTRPGs gone as expected, or have there been any unexpected challenges? And then you've got one more question here. Two more questions. I'll follow up with that here in a second. Let me answer the first. So the transition from board games to TTRPGs has actually gone better than expected. And I'm not just saying that because we're now doing TTRPGs. In many ways, we're doing TTRPGs because it went better than expected. It's not just because I'm passionate about them and most passionate about them. It's because so Pickeresque Roman really saved us. Before Pickeresque Roman, we had two projects, Gun and Gun and Embryo Machine, that I lost money on. And, I'm an independent publisher. My day job, I'm in social services, so it's not like I'm like rolling in money and I'm like I got a Lambo out in the driveway. So like all the money that I make from the Kickstarters goes into the project itself, and that's that. And anything that I make extra, I just put toward the next project. So when you're this small, you can't really afford to have many misses. And I've talked about this before. But you have a miss as a small publisher, and it's hard to absorb that cost. You have two misses as an independent publisher, and you begin to think, as you're looking at spreadsheets and cost analysis, and you're looking at your bottom line, and you're thinking, I don't know about this one. I don't know how sustainable this is. So I took a risk on Pickeresque Roman. I had no idea if there was going to be a market for that. And had Pickeresque Roman not gone well. And now, let me just say, Pickeresque Roman, the Kickstarter, that went very well. That went like way better than I thought. I wasn't even convinced we were going to fund. And then when we did fund, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, well, we're barely going to break funding, and that'll be that. So that campaign performed unexpectedly well. So had Pickeresque not performed well, then that probably would have been the end of the story for LionWing, because I wasn't willing to take any more losses, because I ultimately lost money on projects. So when I saw Pickeresque do super well, I thought, okay, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that. And quite frankly, books are both more cost effective to print, less of a headache to have to ship. You can keep shipping prices way down. And although the workload is a ton of work and it's complex stuff, I would much rather deal with the workflow of a TTRPG than that of a board game. And I would much rather 1,000 times over deal with production and manufacturing of books over board games every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So unexpected challenges, because that's specifically what you're asking about. And I just told you about all the unexpected good stuff that came from this move. Unexpected challenges. They take longer. They just take longer to do. They take longer to get right. You have to be far more meticulous. There's a lot more communication across team members, but then also across both LionWing and the original design team. That takes time, because you're usually also working in two different time zones, so that slows things down. There's just a lot more to translate and edit and playtest. That slows things down. In the beginning, since we hadn't printed any books, I kind of knew what I wanted Pickeresque Roman to look like, but also kind of not. So it was a lot of back and forth with the printer with samples of, yeah, I like this, but I don't like that. Okay, yeah, you fixed this, but then I don't like this now. So that slowed down the timeline there. And I have to be able to plan far differently than I ever had to do with board games, because like I still have to feed the beast now, right? Like LionWing is gaining steam exponentially. And the train isn't slowing down, but to keep the train at its current speed, I got to keep shoveling coal. And in this case, I got to keep finding books that I like, games that I like. I got to determine, okay, this is how long the book is. This is how complex the book is. These are the royalties involved. This is how much it's going to cost to print. I have to determine that cost benefit analysis there of like, yeah, I think this is worth it. I got to get that into the workflow queue. I got to get that into the localization pipeline and the LionWing. And I've got to line up several projects now. And I have to be way more intentional because these things take way more time. In the past, I could kind of fly by the seat of my pants. It could be in August if we were only doing board games sometimes. And I'm just using this time frame, not as an actual piece of history, but just for my own point of reference right now because it's easier. If we had a board game on Kickstarter right now, in the past, I might not even have another board game lined up, except in 2 months I might be launching, or in 4 months in January I might be launching a Kickstarter, and I might be starting development on that next thing in a month or two. And so quick turnaround. That's not the case with these. These projects are long. These projects are usually a year. And some of our board games took a long time, don't get me wrong, but most of them paled in comparison. So that's that. What are some differences between producing a board game and an RPG? I think I just kind of talked about that. And then are there any board games in the pipeline, or is LionWing a TTRPG company moving forward? So there is one totally confirmed board game that we'll be bringing to crowdfunding, probably GameFound. There is a second one that is probably going to happen, and then there's one last one that still trying to figure out if we're going to be able to make it work. But after that, unless something really catches my eye, that'll probably be it for the board games for us. Diamond didn't take us on as a client because they wanted our board games. They thought our board games looked cool. They had no interest in selling them. And so, now I have another partner in all of this that I have to consider. And both Diamond and I talked about our marketing and our niche and how we're going to approach that. And board games are not a part of that marketing plan and not a part of that business plan. Okay. Compared to stuff like Shadowrun, how does Fledge Witch play? Okay, so I would say probably the most apt comparison between Shadowrun and Fledge Witch. If Shadowrun is, let me think about this. If Shadowrun is Elden Ring, then Fledge Witch is a 16-bit RPG. It is stripped down. It's more streamlined. It is not interested in being the most complicated game on the shelf. In fact, if Fledge Witch was an anthropomorphic book and it was sitting on a shelf, it would probably look at Shadowrun with a bit of disdain, and it would turn up its book nose at the condescending gameplay design of Shadowrun. Now, I say that as Shadowrun's my game. If you've watched LionWing talks in the past, you know that that's my RPG. Shadowrun is my thing. I got started on 4th edition D&D, so actually I got into the RPG game later in life. But once I found Shadowrun, that was the thing. So I say that with all the love in the world to Shadowrun. In fact, I wish I had it next to me. I've got like a $400 Mega CD poster of the Japanese Mega CD exclusive Shadowrun release back in 1994 because I love Shadowrun that much. That's my game. But Fledge Witch is not interested in being Shadowrun. In many ways, it's the antithesis of everything that Shadowrun stands for. But they're also just trying to do totally different things, and they're addressing two totally different player bases. And at the same time, if you're a weirdo like me, you are part of the player base that is dabbling in both. So that's not to say that if you like Shadowrun, there won't be something for you in Fledge Witch, because there totally will be. And in fact, I think Fledge Witch would be the perfect complementary piece to a heavy game like Shadowrun, because it is light and you can get in and get out. But yes, both do run off a D6 system, but they address those D6 systems entirely differently. Yeah, someone said, I had no idea we were so close to a LionWing-less world. Yeah, and Jake said, bless Pickeresque. Yes, indeed. So Pickeresque has in many ways been the game that keeps giving, because it had a successful Kickstarter. It had a very successful, though not as successful, kind of pre-order late backer campaign. Not as successful as Convictor Drive is what I mean. And then yet it was the game that found its way into the Diamond's scouting agent's hands, and was the reason that they reached out to me. And then they learned about the rest of our games because they were interested with Pickeresque, but they wanted to know more. I don't think they were totally on board with just Pickeresque. They wanted to see what else I had available in the near, medium, and long-term future. And then once they kind of got the full breadth of what's happening here over the next 24, 30, 36 months, they were all in on it. But Pickeresque, without it, I don't think, not only without Pickeresque does LionWing not exist, but then Pickeresque is the game that has the clutch play again with Diamond, and I don't think we'd be Diamond clients without Pickeresque. So I actually reached out to Sigray-san just this past week, about this, just to thank him again for allowing us the opportunity to publish that game, which, by the way, Pickeresque did perfectly fine in Japan. It got 5 printings. It did well, right? But with localization, and I think this is the hope of a lot of designers of other territories, when they're inking a localization deal, they hope that the global reach will do something that they couldn't do on their own in their one territory. And I'm just really happy that we were able to do that for Sigray-san, because he's a brilliant designer. He's underappreciated in Japan, and this is such a moment, not just for LionWing, because it's opened all these doors, but it's a moment for Sigray-san to sort of give the middle finger to a bunch of people in Japan who I think doubted him. But that's a story for a totally different day. So, all right, let me get back to the chat here. We're talking about some games of Pickeresque that were run in the community by our resident GM, Churcher Twin Blades, in the Twitch chat. Hey, Af has joined. Af is one of the stalwarts of LionWing supporters. He's a pillar of the LionWing community, because he's been around since the early days. So thanks for showing up, Af. I appreciate that. I know you're a board game guy, Af. So I always wonder what these TTRPGs are doing for you, if anything. Hopefully doing something. Let's see here. Someone said, someone make a book mascot for Fledge Witch. It's funny. I don't know if they're featured anywhere. They're kind of featured somewhere on the campaign page, but there are these few really cute SD chibi illustrations of the cover characters in Fledge Witch that are sprinkled throughout the book that would do very well as mascots for that game. So let's see here. Fry, I know. So we got someone in the chat saying, got to be honest, I skipped PR. Now this is coming from also one of our veteran community members, been around a long time, done a lot for the LionWing community, and he was saying he skipped PR, and I know you skipped PR, Fern. I know it's maybe not your game. I think you should give it a shot. We all can't be wrong about how good Pickeresque is. Okay. Hey, Av, I'm glad you think it's good to see my face. I don't know why anyone would want to see it, but I appreciate the kind words. I know what's in here is strong, even though I haven't taken that many sips because I'm sweating. Sweating, guys. Getting a little hot in here. Yeah, so Churcher said Sigurdsson has been absolutely amazing. He has been because he also gave us Convictor Drive. There is so Sigurdsson has done a number of books in Japan, both Dojin or indie, although the two things are a little different, but I kind of just lump them together into one for the ease of argument's sake. And he's also had some commercial releases. He had I think one book commercially published through Shinki Gensha and then 2 through Arclight. So like the dude is known, but still underappreciated. But he had this one book that sold really well. I think it was his first commercial release, and it was called Never Late Nighters. Like all of his games, he takes like the traditional way that you would think about TTRPGs and just like gives it a little spin, you know, tilts it on its ear a little bit, of where Never Late Nighters, yes, it's about Japanese work culture, but there's something inherently attractive about the design of how that game approaches player experience that I think has my interest. I haven't talked to the Japanese publisher who I think owns the rights to the game about bringing it over here, but it does have a supplement, and I think it's a solid enough game that it could do well in Western markets. But anyway, back to where we are. Someone mentioned the holiday session in Pickeresque Roman. We do have a holiday themed scenario called oh my god, I came up with the name and I can't remember. Guys, this is embarrassing. Come on. Villains We Have Heard on High. I think that's the name of it. I gotta pull it up in my own web store just to look it up. How sad is that? Yes, Villains We Have Heard on High. I was very proud of that name when it came to me. I think it's the only time, like in the LionWing like staff chat, where I patted myself on the back. I was like, guys, this is the one. Check out this name. And I think everyone was like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm like, guys, this is like the coolest thing I've ever come up with. I'm not like terribly creative. Please validate me right now. But if you notice, so we had a holiday themed DLC for Claudia Wild Hunt Festival. I wanted to do a Santa Claus character for our first release, Sinome Coliseum R. We ended up going with a pro wrestler as our promo character, only because the timelines didn't line up. So I love holiday themed stuff. So you will get more holiday themed stuff for our games. For as long as LionWing is a company, you will continue to get holiday themed stuff. Okay. AF. Oh, I'm a big fan of TTRPGs, Bradley. I didn't know that, AF. You know, you were so invested and involved in Gun and Gun, and through all of our conversations and your theory crafting of Gun and Gun, I just assumed, like, this is a card game guy. Like, this is the guy you go to when you want to know about card games. So I'm glad to hear that you're into TTRPGs. Oh no, someone in the chat said they think they're at the tail end of their TTRPG era. I hope not. I hope that LionWing stuff ignites something deep inside where you say, hold on a second. Hold on. I'm not ready to hang up my jersey just yet. Because I think the stuff that we have coming down the pike is worth investing in. Now, of course, I'm going to say that as a guy that owns a company. It survives by people buying the product. And yet, at the same time, as a guy who only chooses games that he wants to play in English and doesn't really think about the sales ramifications much of how that game is then going to do in the English market, though I'm going to have to now think about that, I would say that the stuff we've got coming down the pike is worth checking out, even if you're like, I think I'm wrapping up my time here. Oh, we got another one for the Initial D shirt. Thank you. Thank you. You know what would be super cool? An Initial D type TTRPG. Retroflow saying that's so crazy to me that Seagray is unappreciated. Yes, indeed. The same mind behind PR and Convictor Drive. Now, if you've followed Seagray-san's trajectory, and if you're keeping up with him these days, he doesn't even design TTRPGs anymore. That's what's crazy about all of this. He is mostly in the murder mystery realm of Japanese tabletop games. And murder mysteries are becoming huge. It's such a booming genre of tabletop game right now in Japan. And he's definitely riding that wave. He's also really good at it. In fact, he designs all of his murder mystery games not under the group SGR banner, which is the design studio that is on the cover of Pickeresque and Convictor Drive and the 12 other books that he's published. But he does all of his murder mystery stuff under the name, I think it's the Weekend Club. So I don't know why. I just love that name. No idea why I love that name. It's just good. And it's got like nice little graphic for its logo. Just good branding. Good branding. I'm glad someone tried to save me in the chat. I hadn't scrolled down that far, so I saved myself, Jake. But I'm glad that had I not saved myself, I could have scrolled down and you would have been the first one there with a net out to catch me. That's a friend. All right. So someone mentioned a Halloween session. You know, I don't know why I haven't done anything with Halloween. It's a big deal in this house. My wife loves it. My daughter's birthday is 2 days before Halloween. I guess 3 days before Halloween. What a great dad I am. So her birthdays are Halloween themed. Like Halloween's a big deal around here, right? And yet I've never done anything with it. I don't know why. Maybe I've seen it as like, I don't know, too obvious or something, but that's not true. So now you're giving me something to chew on. But can I do... What am I talking about? The answer to that question is obviously yes, because the question was going to be, can I do a Halloween DLC and then a month or two later a holiday themed DLC? Of course the answer is yes. Of course. Af correcting me and saying it's not just card game guy or TTRPG guy, he's a multi-interest guy. There we go. There we go. I'm glad. So someone in the chat said that LionWing put me back into TTRPG. So that's the stuff, you know, at the end of the day, like selling product is good, and having a successful Kickstarter is good, and being a financially sustainable company, that's all good. But seeing people say like, hey, these games mean something to me, that's the stuff that actually matters to me. So, you know, my day job, I'm in the helping profession. So like, it's just in me to want people to feel good. So to be able to have people not in the behavioral health world be able to interface with me in some way, indirectly, because it's through one of the games, and say like, hey, this stuff got me back into this, or like this helped me, et cetera, that's really meaningful to me. I'm not going to get choked up. I'm not going to do it. So hold on. I love that stuff. And in fact, that stuff's really important, so important to me. It's part of why I chose to look at Convictor Drive, because Convictor Drive, in some ways, in its own tokusatsu way, addresses mental health and trauma. And you might just find Convictor Drive in, you know, your local public library soon. With maybe some kids playing Convictor Drive as a way to learn coping skills and to talk about trauma, being led by librarians. That might be something that's happening courtesy of this new partnership. So, yeah, that stuff means something to me. Fledge Witch is probably the last thing I'm going to try because of the aesthetic. I want magic. And Fledge Witch has you covered. It's got that magic. Let's see here. Scrolling down. Car Simulator. Talk about that initial TTRPG. Would be interesting, wouldn't it? So, you know, someone's talking about, or Church is talking about murder mystery TRPGs, and I've even talked to Sigre-san about maybe testing the waters. I'm willing to take a risk here and there, and I think we're at a point now where we can maybe take a little risk. I'd wonder if the murder mystery thing could catch on here. The problem is you know, they're massive. I mean, they're as long as a role-playing game, and they don't have replay value. You know, it tells it tells one story, and once you know the story, once you've figured out who done it, that's it. So, you know, you pay $40 for a hardback book, or you pay even $20 for a soft cover that you can play one time. It's hard to figure out what the value proposition is there. I'd be willing to give it a try as someone who would like to play one. I'm willing to give it a try just because I want to introduce it to my group. But I don't know if it'd catch on. Don't know. All right, getting through this. Someone says this. Well, I won't use that expletive. I'll say this person is translating Octopath into TTRPG format. So, I mean, I don't mean to spoil anything for you, but there actually is a licensed Octopath Traveler TTRPG in Japan. Square Enix licensed Octopath Traveler TTRPG, and I think Group S&E did it, if I'm not mistaken. I think they did it. Group S&E they're the Sword World folks. I mean, they've done like everything dating back to the 80s and 90s. I think they did that one. Okay, so someone said that they love Toho, and I mentioned this somewhere, but I tried to contact Zune to see if he would allow us to use Marissa as a DLC character in Fledge Witch, and I never got a response back. And I was wondering, like, I have a pretty decent reputation in the Japanese game scene at this point, even on the video game side, because we did publish and localize two kind of like Japanese indie shmup darlings, and those designers kind of spread our name around, so people know about LionWing, right? And traditionally, when I reach out to someone, they get back to me. And so I reached out to Zune, and I was like, you know, it would be awesome if he got back to me, and if he allowed us to use some of his characters as DLC characters. And, you know, never happened. And I was like, gosh, I wonder why. And then, you know, it got announced like 2 weeks ago that Katakawa is publishing an officially licensed Toho TTRPG. So I'm like, oh, well, that's why. He couldn't. He couldn't. He couldn't. That was probably a conflict of interest for him or for Katakawa or whatever the case may be. So, total bummer. I wanted that badly. Okay, question here for the Fledge Witch campaign. What stretch goal are you most excited for? You know, let's take a little look. Oh my gosh, we are $11 away from 35K. I'm about to go. I'm about to go put in $11 myself, just so we can hit 35K on this live stream. Okay, looking at the stretch goals, trying to figure out which one I like the most. Okay, so this is a toss-up, and it was a toss-up for both Pickeresque Roman and Convictor Drive too. Having the forwards by the designer, I love giving the designers the first page. It's the first thing you see, other than like the title page. You open up, you know, you get some end paper, then you get your title page, got the, you know, cover art in black and white, says like rule book, whatever. You flip that over, boom, forward. I love that you can't even get to the book without reading, or at least seeing, because maybe you just flip past the forward and that's not your thing. But they're the first thing you see. And I think that pays respect to, at the end of the day, you know, we've got this successful Kickstarter campaign for Fledge Witch, and that's awesome. But like, this isn't artwork. Yeah, we translated and put a lot of resources into it, and we put money behind it, and we took a relatively small release and turned it into a full-fledged release. But this system isn't ours, it's Hyphen-san. So giving him the very first page is probably my favorite thing, because of the respect piece, because with these English releases, these designers of these smaller projects are finally getting the attention they deserve because their games are so good. And it's cool to get their thoughts, just to essentially make them sit down and write this thing, because there aren't forwards in their other books. And in fact, every time, even Seagrace-san for the second time for Convictor Drive, was like, what should I write here? Seagrace-san, when I approached him, I was like, hey, can you do another forward for Convictor Drive? Like Pickeresque, he was like, I don't even remember. What did I write for the first one? So I was like, let me send it to you. Here's what you wrote. He was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. But it's great to shine the spotlight on them, but also like make them share part of their mind with us all. And I think that's really cool. So that's probably my personal favorite thing. I think maybe if I was a player though, and I wasn't me, I would probably choose the additional lore that we always add to the book. Just because that's one of the reasons why I like RPGs, is I like the world building stuff. I purchased so many RPGs and never even played them. I just wanted to read the setting stuff. So that stuff is very exciting to me. I can nerd out on lore all day. Wait a second. I got to see if this is real life. Okay, so Retro Flow. Retro, I love you. And I need to talk to you about something. But Retro just put in the chat, just added $11 to my Fledge Witch pledge, and we are officially at $35,000 on the nose. Screen cap that bad boy. So we've officially hit $35,000 here on the on the show. Retro, I'll hit you up with that royalty. You know, I got you. Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah, Retro, you messaged me a while ago, and I think I missed it, and then I recently saw it, and you're like, hey, where can I send some LionWing fan mail to? I never responded back to it, except like we talked after that on a couple of occasions. And you're probably thinking like, this dude, I asked him a question, he didn't get back to me. I'm trying to send some fan mail, and this dude just ghosted me. I'm sorry. I'll hit you up in the in Discord. So that's where we're at with all of that. So that means I got to update. Oh no, I don't have to. So we're $1,000 away from our next stretch goal, which is cool. Something that we're doing in this campaign that I'm excited about is when I was looking at the collector's edition, I was trying to figure out, I'm always looking at how do I add value to this thing. It's got to be worth people's hard-earned money. Like, you know, you pledge $85 to this thing, like that's $85 you're never getting back, right? You can make more money and you'll get another $85, hopefully, but never that $85. So for me, I want to make sure that people, they look at the price point and they say, okay, does what's in this package justify that $85 I'm never going to get back? And so while we always offer a little bit of the same stuff in each of our big boxes, our collector's editions, we always offer custom dice because I love dice. I've got too many dice. We always offer a dice tray because I'm a sucker for a dice tray. And again, I like shit to match. So I want my dice to match that dice tray. So we always offer that. And we always offer, a leatherette foil stamped book with our translation notes in the back, all that good stuff. And we typically offer some kind of postcard signed by the designer. I was looking at this one and said, okay, what is that one thing that makes this one different? Because I think in each of them, I've had something a little bit different. Maybe not Convictor. But I wanted there to be something different this time. And so mauled around some ideas, probably came up with 5 different things that I thought could be interesting. And while I talked in one of the interviews, in the interview that I did with the Gaming Monk, about how Fledge Witch was not a love at first sight scouting job, the spell book, the spiral-bound spell book that comes in the collector's edition, was a love at first thought idea. Because I had thought of 4 or 5 ideas prior to that of like, well, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that, whatever. The spell book came to me, and immediately, and I'm not typically like this. It takes me a little bit to see it in my mind's eye and to like flesh it out. But immediately I thought, a spell book, spiral bound book, boom, I knew what I wanted it to look like. I knew exactly what I wanted to look like. I went to Winona, I said, hey, here's the idea. Can you make this happen? And then she churned it out in like, 40 minutes. And so being able to offer that spiral bound book, which is going to be a combination of game sheets and then just blank lined paper so you can write notes in, I felt was a really cool addition and very thematic to what this game is. So that's a first. We haven't offered anything like that before. I'm excited for that. I was really excited about someone had asked this question somewhere, and I wish I could remember. Like, why did I want to do the anthology box set? And I talked about that at the beginning of this, but I also knew that not only did I want to scale down the two previous releases into A5 size, put them in a nice little slipcase, bada bing, make it all look nice. I wanted to offer like one more exclusive. I like exclusives. Now, I usually offer some of our exclusives later on down the road, just in a different format. And then some exclusives I never offer again. But I like exclusives. Like me as a person, I like exclusives. And so I thought, well, what's like a cool exclusive that people would think would be like a little like cherry on top? You're not going to like probably buy the box set for this exclusive, but it's a cool like, ooh, and I get that. But I also had to balance that with like, I didn't want people to feel totally left out if they didn't commit to the box set. And being able to do our first ever LionWing crossover was super exciting. So this is the benefits of releasing a couple games from the same designer, is because you can bundle things together in a box set and the royalties are all being paid the same and they're coming from the same pot of money. It's also nice when designers know each other, so you can do these types of things and they don't mind. And so being able to have some crossover and offer some cool stuff that's exclusive was really exciting about the anthology box set. You know, we got some pre-gen characters, so let me talk about that. The pre-gen character pack for Fledge Witch that comes in the anthology box set is a crossover with one of our board games, Kratia Wild Hunt Festival. It's a JRPG cooperative boss battle board game. I reached out to that designer and said like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I want to do. I think that it'd be really cute and pretty thematic, honestly, if I could have some Kratia characters in this witch game. And Ramo, I mean, like, I should pull up the emails right now, messaged me like 6 minutes later. And this was like a random time in the middle of the day, you know. He's in China. Like it's it's totally different time of day for him. Messaged me back in like 6 minutes. Was like, yep, love it. What do you need? I was like, yes, my man. And then being able to offer a new Convictor suit for Convictor Drive, and then being able to put the villains we have heard on high digital scenario into physical form, and a new side gig. That all felt really cool. So I'm excited to be able to offer that. This campaign, I really was just trying to figure out like, how can I make this one a little bit different than the previous ones? That's always a challenge. I like to offer some of the same things because we get good feedback on some of our products, and I like to, let's keep producing the stuff that people like. And at the same time, how can we shake things up a little bit here and there? And so the spell book and the anthology box set and the little exclusives booklet was a way to do that. For those who missed the previous projects with all TTRPGs, insane. Yeah. So I am gonna post. Someone in the Twitch chat is talking about the Analyzer Convictor suit that you will get access to in the anthology box set. So the Analyzer is a totally new, basically a new class for Convictor Drive. It's called the Analyzer. Worked with Sigre-san to design this. I don't want to talk too much about it yet, but I will say the one unique thing about the Analyzer is its backstory. People will have to be, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter. People will house rule and they'll mash together whatever they need to have the best play experience. But ultimately, the Analyzer takes place kind of after the story of base Convictor Drive. So all the lore that's in the Convictor Drive core rulebook, all of that stuff is before the Analyzer is introduced into the Yokohama zone. So it's not a retcon. Someone asked, tiny bit of retcon. It's not a retcon. So what else could it mean? I won't talk about that tonight. But you'll get access to that, so that'll be really cool. I am going to put something up on the Convictor Drive Kickstarter once books start going out. So I will post an update on the CD campaign page saying like, hey, books are going out, and also you have an opportunity to get a new class, a new Convictor suit. Now, the Convictor suit will be available as a digital purchase on our web store and on DriveThruRPG later on down the line. So you're not totally left out in the cold if you don't get the Anthology Box Set. You'll still have access to that. What's the most jank, funniest, most exhaustive thing you can do in Fledge Witch? That is a question, isn't it? You know, I don't know what the the most jank, funniest, most exhaustive thing that you can do in the game is, because I can't be at every table. You know, the most all of that will be the thing that happens at your table that is the most jank, funniest, most memorable moment for your group. Because you can get pretty wild with the system. I mean, the game clearly has parameters. And at the same time, it leaves a lot of room for storytelling opportunities. And I think that's where you can play off of the mechanics to get a little wild, because of how the mechanics are designed and how the mechanics are supposed to be woven together with the storytelling aspect. Which, you know, when you hear me say those words, you're like, okay, yeah, well, that's like every RPG, right? And yes, it is. And at the same time, how these things come together in Fledge Witch with everything else that makes Fledge Witch what it is, I think allows for unique Fledge Witch moments that can be super jank and super funny, and very ridiculous. I think this is a lighthearted game. It's what drew me to it in the first place. It's cozy, it's relaxed, there's no combat, and it's lighthearted, although Scenario 3, maybe not lighthearted. So you can get really silly with it. You are fledgling witches. You are apprentices, which means like so much shit is going to go wrong for you. Potions are going to blow up in your face. A familiar is going to wreck the house when you tell it to actually sweep and dust the house while your witch is away, maybe dealing with some other crisis in a village, and told you before they left, hey, clean this place up. And you're like, I'm not doing this work, but I'm going to use my craft to make this doll clean the house for me. And then it goes horribly wrong. That could be a moment for you. So there are lots of silly moments that you will, sorry, I just hit the mic. There's lots of silly moments like that. And the game really promotes that kind of play. And that it's so refreshing to have that coming off the heels of two pretty violent games by and large, or at minimum, very combat focused. Now, Pickeresque and Convictor dealt with combat in two totally different ways, but they are combat games. You are using aggression and violence against other people. This time, you know, creatively, I'm like, I got to do something different. I can't go back to that well right now. And so this was the right fit, because there's a silliness and a zaniness that absolutely is part of Tokusatsu and is a part of Convictor Drive. Like, so much Convictor Drive can be a little lighthearted too. You're fighting bad guys, you're taking down villains. It's a little tongue-in-cheek and slapsticky. And yet, no matter what villain you're taking down, or no matter what the framework is for that particular mission or that villain, or no matter how wild and crazy and silly it gets, to be able to take down that villain, you're gonna have to activate your convictor drive, which means every session you're talking about some kind of trauma. Your character's trauma, sure, but trauma inherently is heavy. And so when I was looking at Fledge Witch, it's like, all right, so how do we offer a counter? How do we offer a complement to that system? How can someone have a really heavy moment with Convictor and then the next week play Fledge Witch and have this very kind of breath of fresh air, palate cleansing moment of like, okay, I can let go of last week's stuff because this is just, you know, so fun and whimsical. So that's what I wanted, and I think the game really achieves that. Potion making does work. It absolutely works. One of your 6 crafts is potion craft, so that is a huge part of the game. It could be a huge part of your apprentice's story, and a huge part of the misadventures of your character's story could involve their experimentation and their understanding of what potion craft really is, and how it takes many failures to get good at anything in life, and that includes brewing potions. So, is there like set ingredients that does stuff? No, the game is not going to, it's not going to get, it's not going to get in the weeds that much in the book. It's going to give you some pointers, and then say, and now spread your wings and make it your own. But it's not going to give you exhaustive tables that cover pages upon pages of like, here's ingredients, here's the exact ingredients you have to mix together to make this one thing. It's not that. And so that's the level of freedom in the game. May not be for some people, but it absolutely is for me. And it absolutely works within the framework and the context of the rest of the game. So even if you're like, well, I like my stuff to be a little bit more on rails, I don't want too much freedom as a player, I at least want to be kind of shown which path I need to go down, or I'm someone who does like tables, you could create that stuff. The game allows for that. But also with how the game is designed, it is essentially saying, try something different. Try it our way. Try it Fledge Witch's way. Try it on. See how it fits. See if you like it. And I think that is part of this game's magic. Every TTRPG we have done, I think, has had magic to it. Each book has had that X factor where I can sit and I can send out a press release and I can identify through bullet points, here's everything great about this book. But there's always a bullet point at the end that I sit with the cursor flashing and I'm waiting to type out, okay, how do I put this game's magic into words? And I never can do it. And in that moment, it's always a moment of validation of, and this is the right book. This is the one we should be publishing. Usually once I find a book, I don't look back. I shouldn't say usually. Literally, every time I found a book, I've never then said, oh, I wonder if we should have done something different. Like once I commit to something, like I'm in it. I have to be. But it is affirming when I know, like, I think this book has it. I think it's got that magic factor. It's got that X factor, that thing I can't put into words, but I know is there and that I think other people will know it's there. And then when I force myself to sit down and write that press release of what this game is, and I can't identify the magic, but I know it's there, that's when I know, all right, we're good. Everything is good. With each of these games, I never second guess it. Like, I'm like, this is the game I chose. I'm committed 100%. But I always think, are people going to like this? When I have that moment of clarity of, yes, indeed, the magic is present, then I think people are going to like this. Pickeresque was the only one where I was like, this has got the magic, and I don't know if people are going to be into this. But I don't think that was an indictment on Pickeresque. I think it was an indictment on a complete pivot to a different genre of tabletop games. And I was more concerned about, we've got an audience that's expecting board games and card games. A, are they going to show up for this? And then whether they show up or not, will the RPG player show up for this? Because Pickeresque is inherently weird. You know, I say that lovingly, but this is a weird game, you know? Super theater of the mind. It's a PvPvGM game. It's part social deduction game, part cooperative game, part versus game, part narrative heavy RPG. It's like all of these things. And I was like, a weird game. I hope people find the weirdness compelling, and of course they did. But that was the only time, not because of the game, but because the shift, where I was like, it's magic, but are people going to show up? So that was a really long-winded way of answering your question. And if you've watched any of LionWing talks in the past, you know that long-windedness is kind of what I do. It's strong. It's strong. Oh, I don't think I've seen this person chime in yet in the chat. If I have, or if you have posted something, sorry, I'm just not seeing you for the first time. They said thematics are the largest draw for me, and what made me bookmark and return to support this release was that my only experience in TTRPGs is D&D 3.3.5, briefly 4 and 5e, and most recently Pathfinder 2e. I think an apprehension I have trying Fledge Witch is currently not being sure if there's enough direction to play with players that aren't necessarily good with very open-ended situations. And my inexperience in running anything, usually a player. So let me address things in reverse order. I'm not just saying this because this is the game that's like live on Kickstarter. I'm saying this because it's true. And I think, although Churchier wasn't the GM for our actual play, he can probably attest to this. I think if you've never run an RPG before, this is the one to start with. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think this is the one. I think it gives you really great guidance in the scenarios as a GM of like, here's a story that you need to be telling. If you want to follow the scenario, here's a story you need to be telling. Here are the things to think about. Here are your prompts that you need to give players. Here are some challenges. Here's all the framework. And I'm going to give you a whole lot of information that you can then take and adopt, and you can use, wholesale, or you can twist it and make it your own. But even if you're not running the scenario, let's say you're a new GM and you're like, well, I don't want to run the scenario. I want to run my own thing. The game has a really, really well thought out, I'm pulling it up right now, actually, a really, really well thought out, well formatted, excellent step-by-step guide for GMs. A whole section just devoted for the GM that doesn't bog you down in too much, but also doesn't give you too little. The mechanics, there's mechanics in this game. I remember talking with Jamie, the translator, and saying something to the effect of, when I'm talking about this game, how much do you think I should be, as the person who knows the game the best, as the translator, right? How much of this game do you think is super narrative heavy, and how much of this is mechanic based? And would you say it's more narrative heavy than mechanics based? And she's like, I would not say this is a narrative heavy game. There is a lot of storytelling opportunities, but this is a mechanics game. There's mechanics. They're not exhaustive. And you're not going to have to flip through a tome to understand those mechanics. But there absolutely are mechanics and rails in this game. So if you're worried, like maybe there aren't enough wayfinder signs for me. I think you can put that thought to bed knowing that the game part of what makes it so good and why it did so well in Japan is it has a really nice way of giving you freedom to play with and also saying, and remember, this is your sandbox. And these are the things that I've put in the sandbox. I, meaning the designer in the book. How you get to each thing, there might be some rules of how to do that. And there might not be. Depends on which thing you're trying to get to. Because this thing over here, this might have rules. This thing over here, it's here, but it doesn't have rules. And that's okay. So I think it walks that line that not a lot of games can walk. I don't choose games randomly. My scouting process is very cerebral and it's very intentional, and I'm looking for very targeted things. For this, just like the previous two games, I want games, and fortunately Japanese designers have a lot of these, that walks the line of enough accessibility to get new players and even veterans into the game quickly and having fun at the table, but also enough depth for you when you in that first session or that fifth session to say, I'm coming back next week, or I'm coming back again. Maybe it's not next week, but I'm coming back again. There's more to do here. There's more to see. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm sure plenty of people out there are fence sitting on this one. Like, it's got this, it's got that. It doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. Where do I fall on this? And maybe some other people share that same thought of too much freedom. I would say no. I'd say just enough. There are a lot of checks in the game. I mean, someone just mentioned checks. Lots of checks in Fledge Witch. Lots of dice rolling. I love dice rolling. Okay. Let's see here. I'm catching up. Churcher jumping in, saying I 100% agree. It's a super easy game to run through, mostly as long as you have a lesson to teach your apprentices. Figure out a few challenges that new witches would have issues with and roll with it. Yeah. I do think that, to run a game, you want to have an objective in mind. You kind of want to have a lesson plan. I mean, as the witch, you are the teacher. And I think people need to realize that, when you're GMing this game, you're also part of the game. And yes, every GM is a part of the game. And I say that as a GM in most of the games, which drives me nuts. I never get to be a player, always stuck in the GM role. I think that's also why I like games where the GM gets to play an active part. There's a little bit of that in Convict or Drive. There's a little bit of that in a different way in Pickeresque. And there's a lot of bit of that and in Fledge Witch. And because you are involved in this game as a GM, as a pivotal character in the story, and that character being the witch, who is the teacher of apprentices, you kind of want to almost approach being a GM in this game as being a teacher. What's my lesson plan? What are going to be the things that I challenge the players on to see if they can overcome, to test what they have learned, to help them grow? And then how am I going to praise them afterward for their efforts? Because a big part of this game is, this is the lightheartedness, is praise is kind of built into the system. There's a whole damn mechanic called heart, which is effectively a praise system. So not only, should the witch be praising the apprentices, and not only should the not only should they be praising one another, but you almost have to because of the heart mechanic. So, okay. The fact its inspirations are a ton of game series I love is icing on the cake. Yeah, I so Kiki's and Little Witch, like who doesn't love those things, right? Kiki's is, it's part of my childhood. Like that's nostalgia for me. The thing that really did it for me though was the Atelier influences and how far reaching they are in this game. As someone who loves the Atelier series, as someone who would say that Ryza is not the best sub-series in the larger franchise, fight me. I loved Fledge Witch using that as a source of inspiration. And in fact, you can probably see my bias toward Atelier because there are two influences for Kradia Wild Hunt Festival, per the designer, Ramo, himself. Monster Hunter, Atelier. So this is actually the second time I've come back and I've chosen a game that has Atelier's fingerprints on it. So clearly I have a type. All right, getting through some of this. Fledge Witch is very forgiving indeed. Let's see here. Someone says, can you cast a fireball? So, while there is not combat in the game, there is room to conjure up a fireball or some kind of elemental power that you could use in some kind of challenge. I'm looking at the crafts here, and there's a couple different ways you could get to that, but under Songcraft, literally it says, quote, "This craft covers knowledge and techniques related to chanting incantations that alter the mana nearby, allowing you to conjure phenomena such as fireballs and gusts of wind." So, spelled out in plain text, you can. Now, are you going to use that fireball to fight someone? Well, I mean, there could be danger in your scenario, so yes. But you're probably not going to be casting fireball as you would in a more traditional Western TTRPG. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Someone said strong enough to give us any project keys hints. So I'm going to talk about that. That'll be the last thing I talk about tonight before I sign off. Will be some project keys stuff. Okay. Catching back up here. I know me catching back up on a chat that you can't see on YouTube makes for bad audio and bad video. That's not lost on me, but it's what I have to do, so I apologize. I apologize immediately, but I tuned in a bit late. Who is speaking exactly? That is a great question. If you don't know who I am, I'm the founder, I'm the president of LionWing. So this is me. I'm the dude who's been writing the updates. I'm the one who's been responding to comments. If you got newsletter blasts or PR blasts, that's me too. This is me. He responded to my question about scenarios being in the book the other day. Oh, that was you. Yes. Yep. Okay. Someone said, wow, coming at my girl Ryza. How dare you? Listen, I like Ryza. I like her character design. It's a wonderful design. It's probably the most immersive and the most alive Atelier world that we have to date. But it lacks the magic for me. I don't know why. It just one of the reasons for me is the battle, the combat system. I just nah. I'd rather eat my own vomit. But I know that it's for some people, and that's cool. I'm glad it's for you. It is not for me. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. Because I have gotten through and even liked plenty of games with trash combat engines. So that's not like a make or break for me. But it is one of the things in that game where I'm just like, ugh, gross. Okay, and I appreciate that you've directly answered my 3 questions regarding this project. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's what this show is all about. You get a direct line to me. That was part of why I started this whole thing. Actually, I was like, you know what? You don't have like direct access to like the people behind these companies. I mean, some you do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like the only one doing it. I'm not the first. But it doesn't happen enough, and I just wanted to be one of the ones that does give you access. So here we are. All right. What else we got here? Well, now we just need to know which Atelier game is your favorite. Maruru, probably. I like Verona. Yeah. Yeah, probably Maruru. Seeing Arc, Elk Shoe, and the Night Channel poster for Persona makes me happy. You know what makes me happy, friend, is the fact that you know who Arc, Elk, and Shoe are, which makes you one of 10 people in the world. So we can be on our little island together as the people who know Arc the Lad. I mean, like, listen, I get it. Sony was burned by End of Darkness. You know, like, it was an action RPG, online co-op, trying to do the Diablo thing in an era on PS2 when I don't think anyone wanted that. And as the follow-up to Twilights of the Spirits, okay. I get it. It was a disappointing game. And Sony probably looked at that, and they looked at those sales, and they said, oh, fuck. Never doing that one again. Good night, Arc. Never coming back. Except we're going to, we'll let you have this garbage mobile game. Have fun with the gacha. Just pay us our royalties. Company I've never heard of before making a mobile gacha game about Arc the Lad in 2020. That was strange. But I think it's time to revisit the series. And, hot take, for the 10 people who know about the game, Arc the Lad End of Darkness was a fine game. It was a fine game. It wasn't a good game. It wasn't a bad game. It was just a game. But you know what? I liked that it was trying to do the crossover thing long before crossovers were super popular. Certainly plenty of crossover things had happened in the history of the world, and certainly in video games long before End of Darkness released in 2005. But it was cool having returning characters from the previous 4 games show up in End of Darkness for a brand new combat system that, you know what? I've never used Elk in an action RPG. This has novelty. Was the combat system deep? No. But the game was fine. And it bums me out because I was like one of the 10 people who actually not only bought that game on day one and played it, but I played online and it was fun. Netcode was a little bad. But it was fun. Anyway, Sony, I don't know what Cattle Call's doing. I don't even know if Cattle Call is still a studio. But if they are, or even if they're not, let's just get the band back together. Let's try this thing again. Let's try it. Okay. Valkyrie Profile, Sumeria was a better game. Combat mechanics, well, of course. I mean, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Like, if we're comparing Arc the Lad Into Darkness to Valkyrie Profile 2, I mean, you are 1000% correct. Technically, probably objectively a better game. Did I have more fun with End of Darkness? Better believe it. Better believe it. Speaking of video games, what's the most underrated PSX, PS2 era JRPG, and why is it Vanguard Bandits or Epic Stella? Or Epic Stella, yeah. So Vanguard Bandits, a working designs game, another game with a killer thick strategy guide. I like Vanguard Bandits a whole lot. Underrated, or not even underrated. People just don't know the game exists. I actually think it's perfectly rated for the people who know it, because everyone's like, oh yeah, that game, that's a good game, because it's a good game. That's a solid like 7.5 out of 10 game. I like that game. But the most underrated of the PS1, PS2 era, well, I think they have different answers. I think you can't put the two eras together. I don't think you can put the 5th and 6th gen together when you're looking at JRPGs, because they both just had such massive libraries. I think for PS1, I mean, it kind of feels bad saying this because it was a Squaresoft game, so it's like, well, how underrated could a Square